Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. This week, one person's roadside weed is another's golden treasure. So says a North Carolina fiber artist.
This is too much fun, this going out and just getting stuff that people think is weeds, stew it up in the pot, put your yarn in there, make the colors.
A school system in Virginia suspended its community reading program over concerns about the sex of the book's main character, an oak tree.
Over the years, I've learned that botanists call some trees dioecious, which means they have separate male and female trees. Lots of other trees, like me, are called monoecious. It's just a fancy way of saying that on the same plant, you'll find separate male and female flowers.
And Dolly Parton's Imagination Library program is now available in every Kentucky community.
Children, really, their little minds are open, and I think if we can get books in their hands, I think that's always a wonderful thing.
You'll hear these stories and more this week inside Appalachia. Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. Dee Stiles is passionate about weeds. Using common roadside plants, Stiles makes natural dyes for fabrics. It's a skill she teaches to eager students, and it's part of a mission much bigger than brightly colored yarn. Folkways reporter Rebecca Williams brings us this story from Swannanoa, North Carolina.
It's 8:30 on a rainy Sunday morning, and I'm getting ready to run across 2 lanes of highway traffic.
Okay, go.
All right. I'm here with Dee Stiles. She's a 77-year-old traditional artist who makes natural fabric dyes from local plants. And today, Dee and I are harvesting sumac berries that grow on the hilly highway median.
I might climb on my hands and knees.
We scramble up the hill. Dee leads me to a cluster of sumac trees. I drive by this spot a lot, sometimes 2 or more times a day. But I think this is the first time I've actually noticed what's growing here. We clip some of the dark red berries.
These are real pretty ones. They don't have any black. Look at that.
That's beautiful.
Hot dog.
And drop them into plastic bags. Dee says the traffic is picking up.
All right, we better get back across the street.
So we slide down the hill, wait for a gap between passing cars, and run.
There we go. Woohoo!
Dee has lived most of her life in the Swannanoa Valley of North Carolina. I met her years ago, volunteering at a local nonprofit. But this is the first time I've gone with her to collect dye weeds. Making natural dyes wasn't Dee's first love. When she was a little girl, she used to tag along when her grandmother gave weaving demonstrations. But it wasn't the weaving that fascinated her. She liked to watch the women at their spinning wheels, turning wool into yarn.
I would be watching the lady spin, and I'd see what she did, and then I'd come home, and I'd try to do that on my spinning wheel.
Then one day, she saw someone demonstrating how to make natural dyes out of plants that grew locally. Weeds, basically. And that was it.
I said, so what for spinning? This is too much fun, this going out and just getting stuff that people think is weeds, stew it up in the pot, put your yarn in there, make the colors.
She's been doing it ever since. Outside her house in Swannanoa, Dee is preparing black walnut hulls she picked up from under the trees in her yard. The hulls are bright green and leathery, kind of like hard tennis balls. Dee puts a walnut on a plank, smashes it with a hammer, and separates the hull from the nut.
See, this one has a lot of little white worms, but they don't hurt your dye, so I just throw them in there.
She drops the hull into a bucket and throws the rest of the walnut over her shoulder into the yard.
And let the squirrels have them.
Later, Dee will lay the hulls on cardboard to dry out in the sun. Then she will boil them to make a deep reddish-brown dye. It doesn't always come out the way she expects. She shows me some dull grayish yarn that's hanging inside the house.
These are experiments that aren't quite working the way we wish they would.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Why? What were you going for?
purple.
And this just serves as a reminder that natural dyeing is not an exact science, even if you're an expert like Dee Dee. All sorts of things can change the way your dye colors come out, from the type of pot you use to where you get your water. A lot of the plants that Dee Dee uses for her dyes grow on her land, but sometimes she has to look elsewhere for the plants she needs, like the highway median.
If I'm going to go on some land that doesn't belong to me to pick dye weeds, I try to get permission from the people that own it.
She tells me about a time when she decided to pick some broom sedge, which makes a nice yellow dye. The grassy plant was growing on a vacant lot near Black Mountain.
The lot was covered. It was a pretty good-sized lot, and it was covered. I didn't think he'd miss it.
But the owner came by and asked her what she was doing.
And I explained to him that I was getting these weeds, and I was going to make dye out of them.
He wasn't upset. In fact, he asked her for advice on how he could grow grass on the lot to hold down the dirt.
And I said, you don't need to do that. I said, you've got nature has put here on this lot the very best plant to hold this soil. These broom sedge plants have the deepest roots of any plant around.
Dee Dee worked out a deal with him to leave the broom sedge alone until she could harvest it in the fall.
I said, look, if you will not mow it until like November every year, I'll dye some wool and make you a hat.
And she did.
So I made him a hat that was dyed with the broom sedge from his land. He thought that was great.
Dee Dee's interest in protecting local plants goes far beyond her need for dye weeds. She wants people to recognize the important role that these plants play in the ecosystem. And one way she spreads the word is by giving natural dye demonstrations across western North Carolina. It's Heritage Day at the Folk Arts Center off the Blue Ridge Parkway near Asheville. There are dozens of artists demonstrating traditional Appalachian crafts, and Dee Dee's tent is right next to the music stage. She's got about 50 skeins of beautifully colored yarn spread out on a table and hanging from a line inside her tent.
See, this is white fall asters. I can make yellow or olive green or that olive mossy gray color there. This is goldenrod, makes yellow or olive green. This broom
Off to the side, a big iron pot sits on a propane burner, and every so often, Dee Dee walks over to the pot and stirs the dark liquid inside.
The brown that I'm doing today, I made with sumac. And see, here's some. And then here's how they look after I cooked them. See, I cooked them.
A few younger-looking folks drift her way.
Here's walnut hulls. Anything off the black walnut tree. The leaves.
They are graduate students studying landscape architecture at the University of Tennessee.
Queen Anne's lace and mullein. And
I watch as more and more students come and surround Dee Dee as she talks, and they have questions for her.
So are you worried about, any time in the near future not being able to find what you're looking for?
I am. I'm lucky because I have a big field in front of my house where I can grow a lot of the stuff. But I'm even more worried about the insects. And everybody that eats food should care about pollinators.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so as often as you can in your designs, plant things, native things that can support the pollinators. We have to change. Mm-hmm. Now that there's so many of us, we have to change how we look at the world, or we're doomed.
And there it is. Dee Dee's not-so-secret mission to save the planet by getting people interested in local plants and weeds. But Dee Dee has been the dye lady for a long time. She's been hauling iron pots and giving outdoor demonstrations for 24 years.
I've been out there in the rain and the snow and the thunderstorms and the lightning and everything.
And she's getting a little tired. So back at her house in Swannanoa, Dee Dee tells me about her plan. Dee Dee got a grant to mentor a younger artist and teach her what she knows about the craft of natural dyeing, to continue her work and her mission.
I think the most important thing, not that all the people that see me are going to be dyers, but what I really hope they take from it is an appreciation of the natural world. That what they thought was a weed can actually do this thing, this beautiful thing, and make them more aware as they move around in their day of what they see on the side of the road.
For Inside Appalachia, this is Rebecca Williams in Swannanoa, North Carolina.
That story is part of our Folkways reporting project, which covers arts and culture in our region. To see photos of Dee Dee Stiles' naturally dyed fabrics and the weeds used to dye them, visit our website, wvpublic.org. People pursue religious life in different ways, like diocesan hermits in the Catholic Church. They take on a contemplative life that's devoted to prayer, penance, and a separation from the world. Often, that means long periods of solitude. Recently, a diocesan hermit living in eastern Kentucky was granted approval from his bishop to come out as transgender. It's the first known case of anyone in his position to do so. Louisville Public Media's William Padmore spoke with brother Christian Matson about his transition and finding a place in Catholicism.
Why did you feel compelled to speak out now, of all times?
Well, I did not plan to speak out a month after Dignitas Infinita. That document has kind of complicated my coming out. I had already planned this date well before that document was even mentioned.
And could you briefly explain what that is?
Yeah, Dignitas Infinita is the newest statement from the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith in the Vatican, which is a document on human dignity. And it's a wonderful document for the most part, but there are just a few paragraphs on gender theory and sex change, which basically claim that gender theory wants to dissolve all differences between the sexes and say that gender is changeable or it's a choice. And I don't share the beliefs in gender theory that are in this document. And the document sadly continues a line of church documents assuming that people are trans because they believe in what's called gender ideology. And I know of no trans person who transitions because they believe in gender ideology, because they come to a philosophical position and then decide, well, now I can change my body to, remake myself in my own image as opposed to listening to God.
How has your life been personally affected by everything that's going on, not just in the church, but within state politics?
Thankfully, politics in the state of Kentucky don't affect me directly yet. The bans against medical treatment are just for minors, but they do affect children I know. What has been affected is there's been two things primarily. One, I've been overwhelmed by the positive support from friends, including friends who didn't really know what to think about this issue, but know me and have said, if this is your experience, I really have to reconsider what I thought I knew about it. And the support from trans people all around the world who have been emailing me saying, I had given up on having a relationship with the church, but seeing that you've been welcomed by the church, and that speaks to Bishop John's courage, I feel like I have hope for having a relationship with God and the church again. And that's really who this announcement was for.
And that would be your advice to people who see your medical history as antithetical to the faith? Just listen?
Yeah. Ask me what I actually believe. That's, I'm working on getting my theological argument out there because that's not something that's really been picked up by a lot of the press. It's mostly been, I'm being presented as a dissenter to church teaching, a dissenter from church teaching, somebody who's trying to say that the church is wrong or challenge the church and say that, I know better than God. And that's just not true. I'm trying to say I believe in church teaching about the goodness and giveness of gender and the human body and the goodness of maleness and femaleness. And it's also more complex than we've addressed so far in our theology. So let's just acknowledge the complexity and then build on that incorporate that into our theology, because truth cannot contradict truth. So we don't have to be afraid of acknowledging actual scientific truths that we're discovering.
What do you have to say to those who share your medical history or are thinking about transitioning and also feel that call of faith but don't see a place for them in the church right now?
Well, I'd say don't give up. Keep going toward the people who support you. Keep your grounding in the knowledge that you are beloved by God, that you are made by God the way you are, and he purposely made you that way, which means he finds something good in how you're made and something that you have to contribute to the world in the way you were made.
That was Brother Christian Matson speaking with Louisville Public Media's William Padmore. Coming up, my conversation with Catherine Applegate. Her award-winning children's book about tolerance sparked an outcry and the suspension of a community reading program. You're Inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by Concord University, educating the people of our region and beyond for more than 150 years. More information at concord.edu.
Each year in Floyd County, Virginia, the school division does a program called One Division, One Book. The schools distribute a copy of the same book to every family, with a schedule to read a few chapters each night. My kids go to public school here in Floyd, so we take part in the program too. This year, the school system abruptly suspended it partway through the reading. Families received an email saying community members had raised concerns. The book in question is Wishtree by Newbery Award winner Catherine Applegate. Wishtree came out in 2017. It's told from the perspective of an old oak tree named Red, who's long watched over a community. Catherine Applegate recently visited Floyd for a talk at the public library. I spoke with her before the event.
Catherine Applegate, thank you so much for coming on Inside Appalachia and speaking with us today.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
For people who haven't read it, can you describe what your book Wishtree is about?
You know, it's funny. It's about a lot of things. And I always tell kids, once you read a book, it belongs to you. And you find what you need in a story. But essentially, it's about welcoming. It's about a community that has had its share of immigrants over the years. And it is told from the point of view of a red oak tree. Red, who happens to be 216 rings old. And I decided to do that, because it would be fun, and I love playing with weird narrators. I'd just come off doing Ivan the Gorilla, so I figured I could handle it. And B, because a tree would have a really long perspective on the comings and goings of a community.
I would love it if you'd read a little bit of Wishtree.
I was pleased to see Samar's family join the neighborhood. It had been a long while since we'd had any newcomers. But I knew that with time, they would put down roots, just like so many other families from so many other places. I know a thing or two about roots. One night, not so long ago, Samar came out to visit. It was 2 a.m, late, even for her. She'd been crying. Her cheeks were damp. She leaned against me, and her tears were like hot rain. In her hand was a small piece of cloth, pink with little dots. Something was written on it. A wish. The first wish I'd seen in months. I wasn't surprised she knew about the Wishtree tradition. I'm kind of a local celebrity. Samar reached up, gently pulled down my lowest branch, and tied the fabric in a loose knot. I wish, she whispered, for a friend. She glanced over at the greenhouse. Behind an upstairs curtain, a shadow moved, And with that, Samar vanished back into the little blue house.
What was your inspiration for writing the book? Was there one thing that...
Yeah, definitely. And this has been true on a couple occasions with things I've written. I was just talking to a group of kids at Blue Mountain School and told them, write from anger. Sometimes that's where you get your very best ideas, the things you're passionate about or curious or concerned or confused about, but especially things that make you angry. And when I wrote The One and Only Ivan, I had just read a New York Times article about this gorilla, true story, who was stuck in a mall in Tacoma, Washington, and had been there for 27 years. And I was outraged and wanted to write about it. Wishtree, the catalyst was an article, again, this time about a family in Iowa City. They happened to be Muslim. They could have been any family, but they had just moved into a neighborhood and somebody put a big note on their door that said, "Go away." I was just outraged because we're seeing so much of that. And this was several years ago, and I'd like to say things have gotten better, but I'm not sure they have.
So this book has been selected for community and school-wide book programs across the U.S. What do you think it is that resonates with people that in turn makes it such a popular selection for these programs?
It's a huge honor, by the way, to have an entire school, the crossing guard and the lunch lady, everybody reads the book. I regularly confess to kids that I was not much of a reader growing up. For me, the real gateway drug, if you will, was Charlotte's Web. I just loved that book, and I loved animals. I was absolutely sure I was going to be a vet when I grew up, so it was perfect for me. After that, I started seeing the value of reading, but it took me a while. So the idea of a one-school read, I think if I'd had that when I was growing up, really might have transformed my view of reading. Even if you don't like the book, you don't have to like the book, but you're talking about it, and everybody is having the same experience. With Wishtree, I hope it's in part because it has some funny moments and some poignant moments, but especially because it's so much about community and about how we protect each other and welcome each other. It fits really nicely into a school curriculum.
I happen to be a parent here, 2 kids in the Floyd County school system. And this year, Wishtree was selected for our One School, One Book program. But partway through this year's program, the school system sent out an email that noted, and I'm quoting here, "Some of our community members are uncomfortable with the content in question." And I'll continue that quote. "After careful consideration, we decided to suspend the One Division, One Book reading event. Families are welcome to continue reading the book on their own, but schools will not be hosting any corresponding activities." So it is chapter 5 that apparently caused the controversy. Would you mind reading that chapter?
Names aren't the only way we differ from crows. Some trees are male, some trees are female, and some, like me, are both. It's confusing, as is so often the case with nature. Call me she, call me he, anything will work. Over the years, I've learned that botanists, those lucky souls who study the lives of plants all day, call some trees, such as hollies and willows, dioecious, which means they have separate male and female trees. Lots of other trees, like me, are called monoecious. It's just a fancy way of saying that on the same plant, you'll find separate male and female flowers. It is also evidence that trees have far more interesting lives than you sometimes give us credit for.
Did this come as a surprise to you? And how has it come up in other community book programs?
Well, the first time I'd heard that Wishtree had been challenged, I was actually on a book tour last year, and a kid in a bookstore audience asked me about it, and I had no idea what he was talking about. Apparently, it's been challenged in Florida. It was featured in a Oscar-nominated short documentary last year called The ABCs of Book Banning. And in it, they have this lovely young Muslim girl reading a passage from Wishtree. So that was my first clue that it had occasionally had some effect on people. This particular objection was new to me, And while it's easy to laugh at, I think the undercurrent behind it is very clear.
What did you think when you heard about the Floyd County situation? You addressed it on your Facebook page. What was your initial reaction?
I think what I found most disturbing was that the book was halfway through the process of this one division read. So kids were well into reading it, and there was no explanation for why it was pulled. So the message clearly was, hey, there's something wrong with this book, and you better not read it, which of course there's no better way on earth to get a kid to read a book than to tell them that.
What have you heard from the community here? I mean, you've traveled here to speak. What led you to come here?
This is what I hope people take from this. It has been absolutely miraculous the way parents have stepped up. And a parent reached out to me and said, hey, if you come, I have a B&B you can stay at. And another one said, hey, I'm going to talk to the Roanoke Times and get this covered. And another one said, hey, I will talk to the school board. I'll do whatever you want. It was remarkable. And the open arms with which I was welcomed just said, hey, you got to go visit these kids.
What would you tell kids who've been told they shouldn't read your book?
Here's what I tell parents. If you don't want your child to read a book, that is absolutely your right as a parent. And if you don't want your kid to participate in school sports or a sex ed class, absolutely your right. But you cannot tell my kids what they get to read and what they get to learn. And if I'm talking to kids, I say, yeah, read it. They don't want you to read it, read it. But, that's just me.
What advice do you have for kids who want to be writers too?
I tell them again and again and again, embrace your weird. The wonderful thing about illustrators and authors for children is we are to a person a little quirky. And I mean that in the best possible way. We look at the world differently. And there is such pressure when you're growing up to become just like everyone else. And it's that spark, that weirdness that often helps you look at the world in a new way. I often tell them about the one and only Ivan, which halfway through I decided to throw out because I was convinced nobody would read a book about a gorilla. And then I realized, you know what? I want to read a book about a gorilla. I'm gonna stick with this. And that's how you have to approach your writing. You have to love what you're writing. Don't worry about your best friend. Write from your heart.
Catherine Applegate, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Oh, thank you. It's been a true joy.
Catherine Applegate is the author of Wishtree and other books for children and young adults. For more, visit our website, wvpublic.org. Emily Dubinsky is president of the American Library Association. Last month, she took a 3-week tour from New York to San Diego for the ALA's annual conference. Along the way, the tour stopped at rural libraries, including one in West Virginia. WVPB's Brianna Heaney spoke with her to learn more.
From what I understand, you are on a road trip.
We are. We are on the road to our ALA annual conference in San Diego at the end of the month. We left New York City last Sunday, and we will arrive in San Diego just in time for the conference to start on June 26th.
So what are you doing along the way?
Seeing a lot of wildlife and eating a lot of junk food and visiting 9 different libraries along the way, telling the story of the power of American libraries.
And one of those is a rural library here in West Virginia, right?
It is. We're heading later this afternoon to the Buffalo Creek Memorial Library in Man, West Virginia.
That's amazing. So as you have been talking to libraries, preparing for this trip, what are some of the things that you're hearing from libraries, especially rural libraries?
We are hearing so many amazing stories that will just blow your mind. You know, I live in New York City, live in Brooklyn, work in Queens, and I don't have a lot of experience with rural libraries, but this tour and the year I've spent as president have really opened my eyes to what a library can mean to a rural community. the way that the library functions as a community center, a connector between people and other people, people and their neighbors, and also people to public resources, as well as just having a book to read at the end of your day.
So talk to me about some of the experiences that you've had so far on the road visiting these libraries.
Well, you are just the second stop on our tour in Man, so I will know more in a week. But we just left Rhode Island, where we visited Cranston Public Library and learned from librarians all around the state who joined us in Cranston to talk to us about the incredible programming they provide, everything from support and training for public sector workers dealing with the impact of the opioid crisis, to a plant sale they host in West Warwick, Rhode Island with Girl Scouts of America.
Talk to me about some of the modern needs that rural communities are needing and wanting from their libraries.
One of my favorite rural libraries in the country is in a tiny town called Donnelly, Idaho. And I grew up in Idaho, although in the big city in Boise, but in Donnelly, Idaho, the librarian there, Sherry Shaline, not only collects books and reading materials for all ages in her community, but she also sees the rural library as the heart of the community. And that's an area where the majority of people under the age of 18 live below the poverty line. And they need access to not just books and not just broadband internet, but also joy. So she has collected a bounce house as well as a cotton candy machine that anyone in the small rural community can check out so that every child can have a birthday party to remember. So it's things like that, right? Where you've got rural communities where much of the sort of wealth has disappeared a little bit, but you've got the library working overtime to make sure that people have not just what they need, but also the things we need to live more than just a bare life.
On the flip side of that, what are some ways that listeners and community members can better support their rural libraries?
I think the single most important thing a person can do to support their library, rural, urban, whatever, is to use it. When we use our institutions, we expand them, right? We indicate and demonstrate to the public that the library is worth saving, worth preserving, worth expanding. So use your library. So if you have a library card, go check out a book, attend a program, bring your child to an event. If you don't have a library card, go get one. If you have a library card and your friend doesn't, bring them with you. I think that is the single most important thing we can do. Libraries are a use it or lose it kind of proposition. And then secondly, it's important for all of us to make it very clear to policymakers and legislators that the library is an important public space as well as an entity worth funding so that it can meet the needs of rural communities that simply aren't being met by other organizations.
Yeah, I mean, what would you say to somebody who says, I'm not a bookworm. I don't read a lot of books a year, but I still want to support my library. Is that something that a person could do? Do you have to be somebody who is like a super hungry reader, reads all the time, to be somebody who supports and is involved with your local library?
Not at all. Libraries have so much going on and something for everyone. The American Library Association put out a report earlier this year about library use by Gen X and millennial users. Sorry, it was millennial and Gen Z users. And those users, what was interesting is first that they were using libraries at a much higher rate than other generations. But second, that a lot of the people who reported using libraries avidly reported that they were not readers. Weren't readers at all. Wow. So libraries have so much more to offer than just books. And myself, are you a reader?
Yeah.
I'm a huge reader, but you don't have to be a reader like me.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's been amazing about touring the country and visiting libraries is seeing how much programming and outreach happens in every community that's really specific to the community.
So a lot of people in these communities are having a really hard time communicating with each other, knowing what's going on. How does the libraries fit in that context? And are they able to bridge that gap as we see more institutions fall in this region, like news organizations, radio, even like little trading post magazines, ways that people communicated about various subjects on various fronts. I mean, people in southern West Virginia would use the newspaper to know who died, who got married. And with the closure of so many of these newspapers, I mean, the one that comes to mind right now is a newspaper out of Welch that closed last year. But is there an opportunity for libraries to rise to that occasion and help bridge that gap?
It's a heavy question, right? Because the library also is an institution under extraordinary pressures and not supported in the ways that it needs to be to fill those gaps that you're describing. So the library, if we think of it as an institution for democracy, right? That if one of the fundamental tenets of a democratic society is that everyone has access to the information they need to both know what's going on and to come to an informed conclusion about what they think should happen next, and then have the means to express that opinion and shape policy and shape the future, it relies on access to information. So what you're describing about the collapse of the media sort of ecosystem in rural West Virginia and rural America in general, and really the whole country, that's devastating. But the library continues to be a place that not only does it have the internet, which is like an essential conduit to information right now, but we also subscribe to what newspapers there are, right? And so can give access to the print and digital information necessary for an informed democracy. So can we fill all those needs? No. We circulate information that has to be produced and circulated in the first place, right? And so until you've got to support the media ecosystem also. But as the tool for circulation and distribution of that information, we're essential.
That was Emily Dubinsky, president of the American Library Association, speaking with Brianna Heaney.
Back through the years, I go wandering once again. Back to the seasons of my youth.
One program that's connecting rural counties with books is Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. Of course, everyone knows Dolly Parton. She grew up in the mountains of eastern Tennessee and became an acclaimed singer-songwriter, celebrity, philanthropist, and pop culture icon. The Imagination Library is a childhood literacy program she started in 1995. It sends books to children all over the world at no charge to their families. Last month, the program became available to all children aged 5 and under in Kentucky. When that happened in West Virginia in 2022, Dolly Parton visited Charleston and spoke with WVPB executive producer Suzanne Higgins.
Dolly Parton, welcome to West Virginia on what is now the Dolly Parton Imagination Library Day.
Well, to have a day named after our Imagination Library is a wonderful thing, and I'm always glad to be in West Virginia. Everybody's been good to me through the years.
Now, the Imagination Library is, of course, your early childhood literacy program that you started almost 30 years ago. It has spread from your home county, to really a worldwide program. For you to see a state like West Virginia, small, rural, certainly with challenges of poverty throughout our state, to see West Virginia embrace your program, the Imagination Library, really invest and partner with your foundation, it must be very gratifying in terms of what you set out to do so many years ago.
Well, it is very gratifying, and I'm very touched by it. And the people of West Virginia are just like the people in my home state of Tennessee and the way we grew up, knowing how hard times could be. But the Imagination Library is for all children, not just children that are having hard times, but children, I think, really their little minds are open to learning things, and I think if we can get books in their hands, teach them to read, when they're young, in their most impressionable years, I think that's always a wonderful thing.
Tell us a little bit about how the program works. A family member registers a child, hopefully a newborn, so they can go through the program until age 5. What can that family expect?
Well, first of all, people do need to know that. A lot of people don't understand that there's no money involved for them. All the parents have to do is to register the child. And that little child gets a book a month, and it comes in the mail with their own little name on it. So as soon as they get big enough to know they're getting this book, they run to that mailbox and they bring it in and have have someone else to sit down and read with them, which is great. It's kind of a great way to bring families together too, whether it's a parent or a grandparent or brother or sister. But it's a wonderful thing just to register and get that little kid going, and it'll learn to love the books, the smell of books, the touch of books, and just, it just really opens their little minds to possibilities.
Talk about the inspiration for the Imagination Library.
Well, the way I started the Imagination Library was back in my home area of Sevier County, Tennessee. My dad, like so many there, like so many here in West Virginia, they were hardworking people living on farms, and they didn't have, they had a bunch of kids, and the schoolhouses were miles away, and most of them didn't get a chance to go to school, and they couldn't learn. They didn't learn to read and write. My own father, that's who I started the program for. And my dad was he was smart, so smart, and just knew how to do everything, but he just could not read and write, and he felt he was too old to learn. So I thought I need to do something to lift that burden off of him, because he's such a good daddy and such a good man and so smart. And so I said, Daddy, why don't we start a program, where we give books to children from the time they're born till they start school, and that way they can learn to read in their young years. And so we started out thinking, well, maybe it would go a few counties over. The next thing you know, the governor at that time, Phil Bredesen, took it all over the state, and it went into Canada, and now we're basically all over the world, because my sweet daddy and me thought up the idea to get on out there and do something, and my dad took great pride in that.
The books have messages. Talk about, we understand that the first book every child receives is a favorite childhood book of yours.
Well, it's a favorite childhood book, period, and it was a childhood book of mine. But I still love that little book today. I even wrote a song for a children's album that I did that kind of was based on things that we put through the Imagination Library, different books that we had I wrote songs about. And I wrote a little song about the little engine that could, because that's really the one that we start the program out with, as you mentioned. And so it just really shows children, it just builds their confidence if they're shy or they're afraid and they think they can't do it. And so it's about, I think I can, I know I can, I will. And so I've always kind of likened my life to that little engine, and I often say that I'm proof of that. I'm a little engine that did. So, I kept dreaming, I kept pushing, and I still do to this day, because whatever the mountain is, I'm going to get up there and I'm going to climb it until I can see what's on the other side. So, but we love knowing that little book is in there, and the little song I wrote was kind of about that. Just be you. It's like woo 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 woo. I can do it, so can you. Woo 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 woo. I believe in you. So the little song's called "I Believe in You." It takes all the little pieces out of that little book to kind of give it a little springboard for what the message is in the song. It's very much what it is in the book, that you can do it.
We spoke a little bit about your father. I'd like you to talk a little bit about your mother. You are leaving something with West Virginia today that ties back directly to your mother.
I am. My mom and dad were both very important to all of us. They had that house full of kids. Mom and daddy had 12 kids, 6 girls and 6 boys. And so they kept the family together. Mama kind of was that thread, if you'll pardon the expression, that sewed us all together, kept us all together. And the little book that that's also one of the books that's in the Imagination Library is the story of My Little Coat of Many Colors, because it touches on just acceptance, and it's about bullying also, that kind of an idea. But to show that people are different, and it's okay to be different. You can't persecute someone just because they're different. We're all just part of that quilt. We're the fabric, of God's world, and so we kind of have to sew all those little pieces and know that they're all beautiful in that quilt of life. So Mama made My Little Coat of Many Colors and told me the story of Joseph, from the Bible, about that, just to make me proud of it. But Mama was wonderful in that way. Daddy had his job, Mama had hers, and they worked together to kind of keep that family going. And if you're lucky enough to have good parents, that's a wonderful gift, truly.
As we wrap up here, as you're about to take the stage, any final thoughts about the Imagination Library program here and your visit to West Virginia?
I just appreciate everybody that's taken such an interest and working so hard and believing in it and loving what they're doing. I met all the people when we were doing a little meet and greet, before we go on to do the show. But I could tell they were taking great pride in it, and I took great pride in feeling that, knowing that they really believe in this like I believe in it. So I just really appreciate it, and I just want to say, keep it up, and we'll be supporting you, supporting us, supporting them. So it's all about the kids anyway.
Dolly Parton, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Nice to see you.
For the entire interview, check out An Evening with Dolly, Celebrating the Imagination Library. That's at wvpublic.org. In the 2020 presidential election, West Virginia ranked among the 5 worst states in the country for turnout among young voters. That got the attention of 2 students at Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism. They visited West Virginia ahead of the May 14th primary election and interviewed students at West Virginia University and Bridge Valley Community and Technical College. Here's their report.
I'm Anastasia Mason.
And I'm Megan Downey.
We're in our early 20s and we both study politics.
So we've been following the upcoming election pretty closely.
A lot of my friends don't care about politics or voting. So we wanted to find out, are we unusual?
According to the data, yes. Young people turn out to vote a lot less than older folks. And it's worse in some states than others.
West Virginia is one of those states. In 2020, only 4 states had worse young voter turnout. So we packed up our bags and headed to the Mountain State to find out why.
We stopped at West Virginia University, and this was the first thing we heard. There, we asked the students whether they'll participate in the upcoming election.
Probably not. I just don't really know a whole lot about it, so.
I definitely feel like there's not as many people who are focused on voting because they think that one vote can't make a difference.
Honestly, I don't know who the candidates are. We talking about Biden?
That was Emily Reed, Sam Carver, and Alana Berry. Like most of the young people we met, they're not sure they're going to vote.
18 to 29-year-olds feel disconnected from politics across America. A poll released last month from Harvard's Kennedy School showed the lowest levels of confidence in public institutions since the survey began 24 years ago. According to Amherst College professor Austin Serrett, it's a stark contrast to previous generations.
About 75% of people born in the 1930s say it is essential to live in a society governed democratically. People born in the 1980s and later, that number is 25%.
So, are the kids all right? They're not voting, they're frustrated, and they're disillusioned with democracy.
How did we get here? And more importantly, why don't young West Virginians vote?
It's a problem that even long-term political organizers have been struggling with, like the West Virginia Citizen Action Group. The organization has worked for nearly 50 years to encourage citizen participation in government. We visit the group's headquarters in an early 20th century brick house full of old photographs, campaign signs, worn-in leather couches, and mismatched stained glass windows.
Julie Archer, the group's project manager, says the culture here plays a role in why folks don't vote.
Part of it might be kind of Appalachian, fatalism. We have had some examples of politicians that were pretty corrupt, and so anytime you have something like that, I think it just reflects negatively on even the people who are in there who are good and who are responsive to their constituents and want to do the right thing.
For 80 years, West Virginia was a blue state. In 2000, the state flipped red and has become increasingly conservative since. But Julie and her fellow activists say West Virginians feel whether it's Democrats or Republicans in charge, the state's big problems, especially poverty, don't go away.
It's no wonder many West Virginians feel like their vote won't make a difference. For Julie, this perpetual cycle almost seems like part of the West Virginian identity. And it's seeping into younger generations, too. Amherst professor Austin Serrett says there's a big problem, not just in West Virginia, but across the country.
Many of the students that I teach are caught between hope and resignation. And that resignation is young people have reason to be resigned and disillusioned. How do you move a group of people, a community, a society, a university from one place to the next? And what's missing between resignation and hope is a commitment to democracy.
Data proves this. Nearly a third of youth believe democracy is no longer viable in the U.S., according to a 2023 YouGov study. The stark contrast between this generation and previous generations' commitment to democracy is alarming.
Why are people my age more attached to democracy? In part because we grew up at a time when democracy was really threatened by fascism and communism. Young people have grown up at a time when they could take democracy for granted with all of its flaws.
Sarah thinks things can get better. There were record turnouts of young voters last election.
A conversation about democracy, which was dormant before Donald Trump came down the elevator, is not very much part of the American conversation. And maybe that will, over time, reconnect people to why democracy is important, why participation is important, why it's important to get out there and get your hands dirty.
That story was reported by Megan Downey and Anastasia Mason from the Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern University in Chicago. Till next time, thanks for joining us as we journey throughout Appalachia. Our theme music is by Matt Jackford. Other music this week was provided by Sturgill Simpson, Todd Burge, Joe Dobbs in the 1937 flood, Jeff Ellis, John Ingram, Dolly Parton, and Jerry Milnes. Bill Lynch is our producer. Xander Alloy is our associate producer. Our executive producer is Eric Douglas. Kelly Libby is our editor. Our audio mixer is Patrick Stevens. We had help this week from Folkways editor Jennifer Gorin. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter @InAppalachia. You can also send us an email to insideappalachia@wvpublic.org. Visit wvpublic.org/InsideAppalachia to subscribe or stream all of our stories. Or look for Inside Appalachia on your favorite podcast app. Inside Appalachia is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by Concord University, focusing on students' futures. Classes available at concord.edu/apply.